Welcome back, students. In the previous video, we had started the second part of the story, the best Christmas present in the world. As the author started to read the letter, and in that letter, how Jim McPherson shared his wonderful experiences on Christmas Day with Fritz, the German soldier. And there are so many other experiences which we will be doing in the remaining story of the best Christmas present in the world from part 2. So let's move on to the text. You can see in this page the last paragraph. You cannot imagine, dearest Connie, my feelings as I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer who approached me, hand outstretched, Hans Ulf. He said, gripping my hand warmly and holding it, I am from Dusseldorf. I play the cello in the orchestra. Happy Christmas. Captain Jim McPherson, I replied, and a happy Christmas to you too. I am a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. So, in this paragraph, we can see that Jim said that his feeling was so wonderful that his wife Connie McPherson also cannot imagine the feeling of Jim McPherson as he saw that the officer of Fritz, the German soldier, the captain of German soldier, came with the outstretched hands, shaking the hands to Jim and saying Happy Christmas and introducing himself as Hansulf, and he was from Dusseldorf and he used to play cello. Cello, which means a musical instrument like a large violin. He used to play cello in the orchestra. To the reply, Jim McPherson also wished him Happy Christmas and introduced himself, saying that he was a school teacher in Dorset, the west of England. So like this they introduced each other. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Ah, Dorset, he smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. We shared my rum, ration and his excellent sausage. And we talked, Connie, how we talked. He spoke almost perfect English. But it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset, never even been to England. He had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. So out there in no man's land, we talked of Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and Sergeant Troy and Dorset. He had a wife and son just born 6 months ago. As I looked about me, there were hurdles of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land, smoking, laughing, talking, drinking and eating. Hansulf and I shared what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake, Connie. He thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. I agreed, we agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. There never was a Christmas party like it, Connie. So, in this paragraph, Hansulf was smiling and saying to Jim that he knew the place Dorset. And they both shared the rum ration, sausage and everything. They not only shared they shared their likes, dislikes and about their families and everything. As Hansulf, when talking to each other, said that very perfect English he was speaking, which made a surprise to Jim that how he was talking so perfect English. He got to know that he has never stepped foot on Dorset, how he came to know about that place and how he talks very nice English. He understood that he has a very good habit of reading books and novels, and in school he has learned English. When they were talking with each other, Jim came to know about that. And after that, Hansulf started to tell about his favorite author. His favorite author was Thomas Hardy, who was a famous novelist, and that author was a favorite author of Hansulf, and his favorite book of that author was Far from the Madding Crowd. So out there, no man's land, they were sitting on there and they were talking so many things, and both of them saw the grey coats and khaki coats. All were hurdles. All they were talking with each other and everything about there in the no man's land where the war used to happen. And next they shared so many things about that novel, also about the characters. You can see that the Bathsheba, Gabriel Oak, Sergeant Troy and Dorset, the names are given here. What about that? Yes, Far from the Madding Crowd is a novel in that these characters come across. Bathsheba is a beautiful heroine in that novel. Gabriel Oak, the farmer, the hero of the novel, and Sergeant Troy is the villain of the novel. And Dorset is a place, as we know. Sitting on the no man's land, they were sharing so many things. And also Hansel said that he has a wife and a son, which it was born before 6 months only. As Jim saw that, both the soldiers were very happily sharing, smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating and everything. They even shared, Hansel and Jim shared their rum, sausage and everything, and Jim has given the Christmas cake which was sent by his wife, the marzipan, that is a sweet covering on a cake from sugar, eggs and almonds, which Hansel tasted and said it was very nice, and he had never tasted like this marzipan before, which was agreed by Jim as his favorite sweet was marzipan. So in this we can understand that as both of them were enemies, but they are agreeing so many things easily. So Jim said that it was a memorable Christmas party he was ever seen before, and it will be a memorable day for him. Let's move on to the next paragraph. See that. Then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. Greatcoats were dumped in piles to make a goal post, and the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Fritz. Out in the middle of no man's land, Hansulf and I looked on and cheered, clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. There was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. He saw it too and smiled. Jim Macpherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve this war. A football match. No one dies in a football match. No children are orphaned. No wives become widows. So, in this paragraph, one of the soldiers brought a football, and to make the goal post, the soldiers piled their greatcoats. And what next? They started to play football match between Tommy and Fritz in the middle of no man's land. Here we can see that in the war they are playing football match, and both Hansel and Jim started to cheer on them by clapping their hands and tapping their feet to keep out the cold. And the breathing of both the soldiers were mingling in the air. And in this time, Jim Macpherson suggested that if in the place of war, if there is a football match or any other game to resolve the war, then there no one will die and no children will be orphaned of the soldier. Orphaned, without parents the children will be there, or no wives of the soldier become widows. A very heart-touching line by Jim Macpherson as he suggested. So, move on to the next text, next paragraph. Let's see that. I would prefer cricket, I told him. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning probably. We laughed at that, and together we watched the game, sad to say. Coney, Fritz won, 2 goals to 1. But as Hansulf generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished, the snaps and the rum and the sausage and long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon, and that the fighting would end and we could all go home. So in this paragraph, Jim said that if in the place of football game, if it is a cricket, Tommies will, maybe the chance of winning is more. But at last what happened? The Fritz won the game. But Hansulf very genuinely said, without giving up, Tommies said that the goal of Fritz, the German soldier, was wider than Tommy's. So that is why they have won the match, and the match was won with the score of 2-1. It was not fair according to Hansulf. So next time what happened is they came, both the soldiers, to get back to their trenches. And they finished their games. The snaps, the rum and sausage, whatever they shared, all was finished. Now they knew it all over and they have to get back to their place again. Jim wished Hansel to be well and meet his family soon after the fight gets over. They all can go home safely. Like this the Jim wished, and what happened in the next scene. Let's move on to the next paragraph. I think that is what every soldier wants on both sides, Hansel said. Take care, Jim Macpherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly. I felt he turned to be waved just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey-coated men drifting back towards their trenches. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol, and singing it quite beautifully. It was still night, silent night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of While Shepherds Watched. We exchanged carols for a while, and then we all fell silent. We had had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So in this paragraph, Hansulf also agreed that. So, what Hansulf agreed? Hansulf agreed that, as Jim said, we all want to go home safely, that all soldiers' mind was thinking the same thing. And he also wished Jim to get back soon with their family, and he will not forget him as well as the moment they shared between them. He also saluted and went with the soldiers in the trenches, drifting back. So, after that, the night back in the dugout, which means a shelter for the soldiers made by digging a hole in the ground and covering it. After that, the night back in their dugout, the British soldiers heard that the German soldiers were singing carols very beautifully. Carols is a religious song of Christmas, we can say. Christmas days, they used to sing some religious song of Christians, some carols they were singing very beautifully, that the British soldiers also started to give them a chorus by singing while shepherds watched. And sometime they started to exchange the carol, and after that they all fall silent. Really, both the soldiers had a piece of time, freedom of time, goodwill, a friendly action, we can say, a friendly attachment with both the soldiers. And for such a time, Jim was saying that such a time we will be searching in our lifetime, as we have enjoyed lot of things and we have made a peaceful Christmas day where a war to be happened. We were making peace in the middle of the war, and we don't know that the war ends in a better or bad, nothing, we don't know. So here, whatever the destiny decides, according to that, the soldiers are also closing their hands and looking for that. So let us move on to the next paragraph. Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon, I am sure of it. Jim said to Connie that in this last paragraph, that is the last lines of the letter, Jim said to Connie that this war will be a memory, because the next year Christmas Day we will be remembering that in the war we have been celebrating the Christmas Day very peacefully. And he understood that both the soldiers are longing for peace and they want to return back safely. And as Jim also giving assurance to his wife that he will also come soon and celebrate the next year Christmas together. Your loving Jim. Your loving Jim says that how much Jim loves his wife and shared such a beautiful letter to his wife, sharing his experience in such a way that the feeling of soldiers and everything which others should also know about it. How the soldiers' feeling was there in the war front and what they are longing for and what they want to be in that place. So this is all about part 2, where the letter has been discussed by the author.